Greetings to one and all, it's your old buddy Jay here coming at you with another episode of Countermeasures Intermission. Now this week I am going to talk about Wonder Woman 1984, but before I do that I just want to quickly talk about this film review before I get started on my thoughts of the movie. Now I actually recorded this review over a week ago and have had several versions which I've uploaded to the Countermeasures channel. Now basically what I did is I do what I always do, which is I take the trailer footage, which is all listed under fair use on the YouTube sort of algorithm on their system, and then I basically just run my commentary over the top of it. So the original version had a few other bits and pieces that I dropped in from various other parts of the movie that I'd cut in, and they were just little clips that weren't included under the trailer, and unfortunately I received a copyright claim on them. Now copyright claims tend to be flagged up if you're using music, or if you're using any footage which it hasn't been kind of given the thumbs up to be used within the YouTube algorithm. Now what I then did was, obviously I was horrified and thought, well, I'll take that down and I'll remove anything that's being flagged up as being a problem. So I switched the footage around, kept my review in its entirety, but I changed some of the footage around, re-uploaded it, and then instantly got another copyright claim. So then I thought, well, okay, what I'll do is I'll strip it right back to the trailer, which under the YouTube laws and agreements, etc., falls under the category of fair use, which is how the decent film critics of YouTube actually do the reviews of their films. They run their trailers and they talk over the top of it, or they might talk about it and use clips of that footage within the context of what they're discussing, which is exactly what I did. Now I then got another copyright claim, so I was like, okay, this isn't looking so good. They're obviously not very happy. And bearing in mind this is Warner Brothers, so if I hadn't ever spoken about a Warner Brothers film previously, then I probably would have been like, okay, well, Warner Brothers obviously have slightly different rules compared to the rest of the world, but they didn't have a problem with my Batman trailer review, which I did about 4 months ago, so that absolutely sailed through and wasn't a problem, whereas this one was. So I then stripped it right back to its basics once again and then put it up, and I got what's called a copyright strike. Now your channel can get 3 strikes and then you basically get taken down for I don't know, like 2 or 3 weeks or something like that. You get your wrist slapped basically until they're happy that they don't think that you're going to be any problem. So I was obviously mortified about that, but then I started looking a little bit further into it and I realized that actually it wasn't necessarily based on the footage that I was using, because other critics, like I said, and other channels have used that footage in exactly the same way, and their videos are still up, whereas mine keeps getting taken down. I think the problem is that Wonder Woman 1984 is a burning hot trash fire, and basically I don't think they like the association of any of their imagery being linked to the fact that my critique of the film is that it's total garbage and that no one should go and see it. Now there are other reviews up that say exactly the same thing that haven't been taken down. It's all very confusing, so to avoid any issue whatsoever, and actually to do it in a kind of roundabout test to see if this is actually the issue, I am going to re-upload the review again, but without any footage whatsoever that hasn't been generated by me. So on this occasion the whole footage that you see is my own version, the budget alternative of Wonder Woman 1984. My review still sort of makes sense anyway, so you don't, it's just to give you something visual to look at. So I've cut together my own version. No green screens were harmed during the making of this film, I guess we'll just see what happens. Now there's nothing like being policed by a faceless algorithm, so I thoroughly expect this to be taken down also. So I'm just going to pop it up and see what happens, and so there's nothing more to say other than here it is in all its glory. So sit back, relax, and let's see what they think of this one. Okay, cheers. Greetings to one and all, it's your old buddy Jay here, coming at you with another episode of Countermeasures Intermission. Haven't done one of these for a while. I was actually waiting for some films to come out that I actually wanted to talk about, and 2020 seemed to just keep pushing and moving them all, so I guess that's why I haven't done one of these for a while. So I've actually now watched Wonder Woman 1984, which is what this review is all about, and as you can see, the highly unmotivating shortened brand logo that we've got in front of us here, which I have despised pretty much since I saw it, as it has no ties to the Wonder Woman franchise. It just is a typical kind of marketing stamp, which I've just seen plastered over everything. So had to just get that in there early because it's pretty bad. So off the bat, I'm going to do a quick sort of recap of what the story is, and then I'm going to get into the slightly more nitty gritty parts of it. So the long and tall of it is that Wonder Woman is in 1984, and basically there's a guy called Max Lord who finds a wishing stone. He basically corrupts himself and everyone around him that wishes for things, and the world just becomes this totally crazy chaotic place, and eventually Wonder Woman saves the day, the end. So that's it in a nutshell. Now I have to say that I have seen some really shocking movies in my lifetime, and I have a lot of guilty pleasures of films that are critically seen as being quite bad. I mean, Batman and Robin, for example, back in the 90s, particularly bad film, but it has a secret place in my heart. I will get that guilty pleasure out every now and again and watch it for pure campy goodness. So it can be appreciated. You can just switch your brain off. This film is total garbage. I would not recommend that anybody goes to see this film. I don't understand what happened. The first Wonder Woman movie, which was directed by Patty Jenkins, as is this one, was really, really good. Now, maybe it was just a shock hit for Warner Brothers, who distributed it, and maybe they weren't expecting it to do so well. Maybe Justice League wasn't such a big hit for them, so when Wonder Woman came out, it was a bit of a surprise. I just don't know. The first film had a really good coherent story. So then when I heard that this was coming out, so it's Wonder Woman, it's the 80s, which is when everyone remembers the old 1980s TV show, or late 70s, early 80s TV show being around. The 80s offers so much in terms of colour and vibrancy, and rolled up suit sleeves, and workouts and all this kind of stuff, and that whole sort of fashion of the 80s is just so brilliant, and that whole time of excess that has been shown in other TV shows like Stranger Things, etc., has been done so well that you think, great, they're going to throw this massive budget behind this whole kind of look and feel and the concept of this movie. I couldn't actually wait to see it, because I thought, whether the story's as good as the first one or not, it doesn't really have to be better than the first one, as long as it's coherent and it makes sense. They've got this excellent style which they can really push to really do something creative with. They've got a whole wealth of design and creativity from the time at their fingertips, which they could really capitalise on, and they do absolutely none of that. It is a total wipeout in terms of keeping things within that time period. The first kind of 10 minutes maybe has a few throwbacks. It's like, there's someone jogging, there's someone watching Keep Fit stuff on TV, there's kids in a mall, all that stuff, but it's all been done better on other TV shows and other films, like I said, like Stranger Things and similar kind of sort of, I guess, what are now period dramas, and it just falls flat. So in the first 10 minutes of this film that happens, and then this could literally be set in any other time, just because it suddenly feels incredibly up to date and more recent. And every now and again they'll have a little bit of fashion in there that just reminds you it's the 80s, or there'll be a sort of funny haircut that there's that's sort of a little bit of a throwback to that time, but they just don't push it far enough, and I think it's a real missed opportunity. So having gone on that rant, and obviously from a kind of design and branding point of view, I jumped straight on the fact that the WW84 logo is so lazy. I'm so sick of seeing that abbreviated cliche on everything, not just on film posters. They are particularly guilty of that at the moment, of trying to give it a lot of films those kind of abbreviated brands, and it just doesn't work. I just don't like the style of it. It doesn't say anything about Wonder Woman. I just really, the whole sort of design aspect of that is a total failure in my opinion. The only thing I do like is that a lot of the photography within the marketing that came out around the time that this film was originally meant to be out, which I think was summer last year. It might have been a little bit later than that, but I think it was originally around that time. It did look really good. I like the vibrancy of the photography, and the all the retouching and the reproduction of that stuff look really, really good. None of it translates into the movie. There's none of that kind of vibrancy within the visuals of this film, which I think is a real shame and a missed opportunity. So aside from what it looks like and the sort of general design of it, I'm clearly not a fan of this movie. It is shocking. The plot of this is absolutely shocking. Now, my abbreviated version is basically everything that does happen. That is the incredibly short version of a 2.5-hour movie that just stretches out a series of scenes that are incoherently linked together, that have massive plot holes that do not really make any sense. It's just, not even in a kind of Zack Snyder way where maybe the story is kind of hanging by a thread, but what you're looking at is so impressive and creative. It doesn't have any of that. It's not it's full of cliche. The character arcs are just weak and not really thought through. I mean, the best part of the film is the first 10 minutes. There's a real kind of throwback to the old Dick Donner Superman films of Wonder Woman saving some kids in a mall from some robbers, and quite frankly, if the whole film had been like that, I would have really liked it. But they did a little bit of that, which is a bit of a kind of nod to the past, and then they just completely and utterly ignore all of that, and then just go down this other sort of stylistic route, which the plot just then kind of takes you down this rabbit hole of incoherent garbage. So the first film was directed by Patty Jenkins, but it was written by someone else. This film was directed by Patty Jenkins and written by Patty Jenkins, and I actually wonder whether or not she has the writing chops to tackle such a massive franchise like Wonder Woman. She certainly can make things look good on screen, but as far as kind of coherency and plot and using the elements of the character in the sort of what feels like a sort of more realistic way, it just doesn't hold together, and I'll explain why. Basically, I just didn't really feel like she understood comic books. I'm really surprised that Jeff Johns also co-wrote the script for this film. And Jeff Johns is a DC legend who's been involved with DC for an incredible amount of time, like DC Comics. And he's been part of some really, really huge decisions in terms of where their stories go and the characters. So I'm really surprised that he, ultimately is the kind of Kevin Feige of the DC franchise. I'm really surprised that this got the go-ahead, to proceed, because it's a total mess. So the actors and actresses, they're all fairly good in it. I mean, they're doing the best they can with what they have. I've always liked Gal Gadot, as she's called. A lot of people call her Gal Gadot, but that isn't how you say it. Her last name is Gadot, and basically she stars again as Deanna Prince, who is Wonder Woman, and she's okay in it. She's doing the best she can. I think she's a really well cast in this franchise. She's good in the other movies, and she's doing her best with what she can do here. Chris Pine is back for absolutely no reason whatsoever. I hated him in the first film. I thought he was the weakest part of it. He plays a character called Steve Trevor, who is Wonder Woman's love interest. I've always disliked that character arc in the comics. It doesn't translate well to film. It doesn't make any sense. Like in this movie, spoilers for the end of the first one, Chris Pine dies. So in this movie, which is this decades after Chris Pine dies, who she only knew him for a week, and yet Wonder Woman's still, pining, if you like, after the Steve Trevor character. She's obviously missing him and no one else. There's bits where she's sitting by herself in a coffee shop looking sad, and you just feel like, you knew that guy for a week, literally for 1 week, and then he died, and now you can't get your life back together. Now, I also think that in this kind of world of where there's this kind of progressive thinking behind having female leads running these large franchises, I think it's an excellent idea. It should have been done many years ago. It's something that is changing, where movie studios are starting to realise that it doesn't have to be a pasty-faced 40-year-old white male lead in every single movie. There can be more diversity, and I do feel like that's a really progressive thing that is happening, and I'm enjoying the fact that is bringing us some more interesting entertainment. This film absolutely does nothing to support that. This whole movie is based on a woman who essentially can't get on with her life because she can't live without a man. Patty Jenkins also portrays all men in this film. Literally all men in this film are portrayed as being sort of potential rapists. Basically, they're all like trying to chat up Wonder Woman every time they can. They're drunk in parks trying to grab women and pull them into bushes, and it's offensive on so many levels, and it's just not good writing. It's not done well. And it's not even like there's 2 or 3 characters like that. Every single man is hitting on every single woman in this film, and the franchise is suffering because of it, because it's taking these situations that don't feel realistic. It's basically saying, men, they're all sexist pigs, and women are so downtrodden, and we can survive without the men. Yet the whole plot of this film is about a woman who can't survive without her man. I mean, it's so contradictory. I don't understand the decision behind that. That is only the tip of the iceberg. The plot is terrible, as I said before. There's some scenes in this where there's things going on with the editing which is just a mess. I mean, there's a part where a guy gets thrown across a pavement and he drops his keys and a load of stuff on the floor, and then the next shot it's all gone, and it's so blatantly all gone. They even make the sound effects of like all his stuff falling out, so you're really suddenly aware of like these things falling out of his pockets during this fight, and then it cuts to the next scene and it's all gone. It's just so sloppy. I don't even know where to start. I've got a list here. There is a moment in this film where, never mentioned before, that Wonder Woman can turn things invisible, and there's a moment in this film where they're in a jet and she just randomly plucks it. There's no foreshadowing at all. There's no mention of it in the past. It's just someone once said to Patty Jenkins, Wonder Woman had an invisible jet. That is something that actually happened in the cartoon, in the comic book, and the cartoons, and it's a well-known thing that she has an invisible jet, but it's obviously part and parcel of her character and her kind of, back in the day they were trying to throw a little bit more sort of Bruce Wayne, James Bond sort of stuff her way, so she could fly around and the world and do stuff. And in this film, there's no mention of this ability ever before. There's no foreshadowing, like I said. And then suddenly she's in the plane. They're flying along. The radars are picking them up because they've stolen this plane. They need to fly to another country. And she just says, "Oh, there was this time when my father was trying to make things invisible. I think I can make this invisible too." And then she just makes the jet invisible. And then they're flying around in an invisible jet. It's so... I will suspend my disbelief for any of these movies, because put me in that world, give me the parameters, say there are invisible jets, say there's all this, that's fine, I can understand it. But when you kind of start to, as you're watching the film, you're starting to work out what the barriers are and what the parameters are, and then they just change it. They're just like, well, no, this can happen now. And with the bad guy having the ability for people to touch him and make a wish, it just basically, all the stakes are completely out of the window. There's no threat, because it's anyone can do anything at any time. There's invisible jets. There's a moment in this film where, spoilers, I'm sorry, but there's a moment in this film where Wonder Woman just jumps into the sky, having lassoed a cloud. She then lassoes a lightning bolt, and then she flies. She just flies. And bearing in mind that this film is set before Justice League, right, where she doesn't fly. where none of those, there's no bit where she's like, I know I can make everything invisible, or she's like, hang on a minute, I'll use my lasso that lassos onto clouds. It's just so unbelievable on a whole new level. I mean, it doesn't fit the world building in this film whatsoever. It does injustice to the character, and I'm really disappointed. I think that there's a whole load of tropes in here. I haven't even mentioned Cheetah is in it. So this is the actress Kristen Wiig, the comedian Kristen Wiig. Kristen Wiig, sorry. She's in this, and she plays Cheetah, and it's basically another superhero film trope where it's the nerdy girl that works with the popular girl who wants to be popular but can't, and then makes a wish to be popular, and then suddenly she wants to be like Diana Prince, who she doesn't know is Wonder Woman, and slowly she gets powers, and there's probably a really good story there, but it's just muddled underneath everything else. And she's just tossed in this film for someone so that Wonder Woman has someone to fight. That's basically it. She's like the bad version of Wonder Woman, and it's not done very well. I just feel that that trope of the kind of nerd, the Jim Carrey in I think it's Batman Forever, who's the kind of nerdy guy who's not very good and all this kind of stuff. But he's a genius and no one realizes, and then something happens to him and he becomes this kind of overarching kind of powerful enemy. That we've seen that time and time again with characters in all of these movies, and this is nothing new. They just take that trope and they just run with it, and it plays out exactly as you'd expect. And also, she fights Wonder Woman and is no match for Wonder Woman whatsoever. And spoilers, she Wonder Woman basically electrocutes her underwater. And you think, oh, that's cool, Wonder Woman's just killed her. Then she hasn't killed her because she's not dead. And then there's a whole bit where this whole sort of film culminates in a whole idea that if everyone renounces their wishes, then things will return back to normal, and Max Lord, who's the main antagonist of this film, will all his work will be undone. And obviously the whole world just renounces their wishes. So all the people that have touched him, and he does this whole thing where he connects through a television, which means that he can connect to people all over the world, and he says to people, wish for everything, wish for everything. Every time they wish, he takes some power from them, and he's becoming this powerful thing, and everyone else is wishing, and there's things like nuclear rockets in the sky, and immediately everybody wants to kill each other, and because that's the world, and then there's a whole bit where Wonder Woman does this kind of speech thing where it convinces everyone to renounce their wishes, which basically takes away his power. But then I have this other problem, which is like, surely some of those wishes would have been, I wish my grandmother hadn't died of COVID, or like, I wish my leg grew back, or I wish I could see, and all these kind of very simple things, rather than the kind of extravagant, I need a Porsche, which they constantly drop into this film about the excess, and that's what people want. And I just feel that there's a whole conversation there that was never had, which just unknits the whole plot of this film. So that's just one of the other things. I mean, there's so much to talk about. So just going back to the Chris Pine character, he returns. So he comes back, but he doesn't just pop up. This is Wonder Woman's wish. She wishes that her love returns, so he pops up, and as a result, they have a thing in it which is called the monkey's paw, which is the old thing, which is like, yes, you can wish for something, but you have to give something back in return. So that's where Max Lord is taking power from people by granting them wishes, and she Wonder Woman wishes for Chris Pine, but the idea is that it can, what she gives up is that she gives up her powers, but she doesn't give up her powers because she can still kick a truck into the sky. She gets hit by a bullet and it, directly, and it just makes her bleed a little bit rather than bounce off her. So she hasn't actually really given up anything. And the whole time that she doesn't have her powers, because Chris Pine is in the world thanks to her wishing her, she's just Wonder Woman still, doing all the Wonder Woman things, and she's flying and doing all this other crap, and it's just like there's no stakes whatsoever. It's not like Superman 2 where he gives up his powers so that he can spend a normal life with Lois Lane, and they show that really well. They're he gets beaten up by people in a restaurant, and the bad guys can beat him up, and it's really interesting. It's like, Superman now has to rely on his nobility and his skill to kind of navigate these situations. And yes, okay, eventually he gets his powers back. Spoilers for 1986 or whatever, and and then he goes back to the restaurant and he beats them up, and it's all really exciting because there was a moment where he was weak. It's like the I think it's it could be the Wolverine, where Wolverine gets infected by nanobites, which basically take away his powers of healing. So there's a whole part of that movie where he can't heal, and it just makes everything so much more tense because he's now finding himself in the same situations, fighting the bad guys that he would always fight, but he doesn't have his powers, and it's really interesting. It brings the tension up. They never take Wonder Woman's powers away. They just basically dilute them down to the point where now she can only kick a truck into the sky, and now she can only fly. I mean, like, I just don't understand why they would do that. It just doesn't make any sense. You know, she wishes for, you know, she can make a jet go. If anything, she can do more. She makes jets go invisible now. So it just makes no sense whatsoever. So yeah, I think that there's a whole load of those kind of scenes where she's, sort of not connected very well, and there's a lot of this stuff happening all the way through. As you can tell, like, I really quite dislike this movie. I don't mind badly filmed things as long as the writing's good. Or I don't, it's so choppy. It just doesn't really make any sense. Now, that none of this even highlights the main thing that bothers me the most about this film. So Chris Pine returns. He doesn't just pop up, like I sort of started saying. He doesn't just pop up. He basically takes over another man's body. So one day she just wishes for him to come back, and what happens is, and Chris Pine explains this, he just wakes up one day and he's in this guy's apartment. He doesn't really know what's going on. He looks in the mirror. He looks different. He looks like this other kind of cheesy looking dark haired dude. He goes and finds Wonder Woman and starts talking to her. She initially just sort of thinks he's another creep trying to hit on her, like all men in this film are portrayed as. And then he says a few things to her that only Chris Pine's character Steve Trevor could know. So she starts to realise that actually her wish did come true, and that this really is Steve Trevor. Now, he never physically changes from the body of the guy that he's taken over. We see him as Chris Pine because that's the actor and that's the character that they want you to see. And we see it from kind of Wonder Woman's perspective as she's imagining him. But actually, throughout this whole film, he's this other guy, just Guy X. So in all of this film, he is, there's not a cut that exists, but I really wish there was a cut that existed where it is the other character just sitting there delivering all of Chris Pine's lines, because there are moments they never even discuss where this guy's from, if he's got family. I mean, they're in his apartment at one thing trying on kind of loads of 80s clothes like bum bags and stuff like that, which is a little bit cheesy, sort of fish out of water scenarios or whatever, which they did last time, which made no sense, and this time they do it and it still doesn't really make very much sense, they really should have left that at home, but they do it anyway. And yeah, so all the times that there's all these battles going on, and like Chris Pine is fighting in the White House, and he's like he's on the back of a Jeep and he's fighting all these guys, and there's people shooting at him and all that stuff. They're just putting this other guy's life in jeopardy. It's like it's the biggest plot hole, it's the biggest mistake, it's the biggest question of this whole movie. And the whole time I'm watching it, I'm not thinking, oh, that's Chris Pine and they're going through some kind of interesting adventure. I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, that bloke's just a normal guy. They just picked him out of nowhere. It's not his fault. I mean, and then they do a little bit at the end where Wonder Woman sees him again, and and they sort of, they're standing in this kind of Christmas square in New York, I guess, and she looks over at him and they had to exchange a few words, and he obviously doesn't remember anything because she renounces her wish and Chris Pine goes back. Spoilers. And and then he just sort of walks by and she gives a sly wink, and then I'm like, what the fuck? It's like you slept with that guy. He doesn't even know. You essentially like date raped him. It's just ridiculous. So it's the worst part of this movie, and there are so many bad things going on here. I think it's another example of I just don't know just bad writing. Someone said to Patty Jenkins, well, if the first one does well, you can write the second one, and then and then it just turned out really badly, and I'm so disappointed because having, not got to go to the cinema and see films that I wanted to see last year. I mean, I saw Tenet, and that's basically the only movie I can remember seeing last year. And everything else has been delayed and moved forward. I was really looking forward to this kind of kick-starting the year being, a sort of interesting, sort of new take on on the kind of 80s approach, and they just absolutely botched it. It's terrible. And the kind of female leads, I'm all for it, and I absolutely want more and more. And the Black Widow film that's coming out, meant to be out this year, it's coming out later in 2021. That looks amazing. So I'm hoping that will redeem sort of female lead superheroes in some way, because these just aren't doing it. This film and the Captain Marvel movie, they were both total garbage. Brie Larson is just terrible in that film too, and there's loads, and that follows a Marvel formula that's tried and tested and always been successful, and it almost doesn't work with Brie Larson in the role of Captain Marvel, but I'll get into that another time. I just feel that I feel let down by this film. I wouldn't recommend anyone sees it. It detracts from the first movie. It damages any movies that are meant to be set behind, afterwards, because if she can make things invisible, like I said, why didn't she do that in the other movies? And I know why, because they're just trying to do something more interesting with this film and try to kind of add elements that people might find shocking and interesting and kind of adventurous and superheroes and this stuff. I feel that this is it's just a series of really bad scenes cobbled together that don't really make much sense. There's a lot of incoherency. The dialogue is absolutely terrible. It feels like if you were to pause this film at any moment, it looks incredible, and I think that in itself is the answer there. I think this has a massive thing to do with trying to cash in on the Chinese market. If I was going to put my hat in the ring, because there are scenes where she's wearing a gold outfit, looks incredible. There's scenes where she's fighting Cheetah, looks incredible. There's films where they're in invisible jet, looks incredible. All that stuff looks really cool. They're flying through fireworks in the invisible jet. Yeah, it all looks amazing. It makes absolutely no sense. It just doesn't work on all the levels that I've mentioned. I just feel that that is because trying to capture an element of the Chinese market, it needs to translate in a way where there's no language, where it doesn't really matter what's being said or what's going on screen. It's just kind of dumbed down visuals that appeal on such a massive generic level. It's the zero character development. The pacing is all over the place. Warner Brothers, they've been struggling so much to get things off the ground with with their DC movies. They did really well with the first Wonder Woman. Even Aquaman, even though it was slightly over the top and whatever, even that made more sense than this. I'm just really shocked that this went out in the way that it did. For all the reasons that I've said, aside from the fact that there's some dodgy CGI in this as well. I didn't even talk about the CGI. There's bits where some, like I said, some of the scenes where you freeze them and look at them, whatever, they do look good. But then when you see things in motion, like there's a fight at the end where Wonder Woman's fighting Cheetah, and it was clearly all shot in the day. Obviously the CGI looked so bad that they had to tone it all down to make it look like it was all shot at night, and it just doesn't feel right. When you're looking at it, you're like, this, it just feels like someone's turned the contrast down on your TV. It just doesn't have the right kind of lighting and the mood that you would get if you were doing a night shoot. And and having been on a lot of those in the past on art directing various shoots and things, I can tell you now that it doesn't your eye immediately realizes that there's something not quite right. Your brain registers as it being not feeling right. So I think for all of those reasons, everything above, it's a definite no. Never ever watch. Do not buy on Blu-ray, DVD. Don't even download this illegally. That's how bad it is. If it's free, just don't. Now, I do have to give it a rating out of 10, unfortunately. I can't give it a 0, because there are things in here, like I said, some of the visuals and things, they do look quite impressive. Some of them not so much. There's obviously a lot of effort gone into it. There's a lot of, like I said, all the post-production work. There's, the actors and the actresses, they can't really help what they've been given. They're just chewing on an old bone here. I didn't like any of the branding. Like I said, some of the photography, the visuals and the graphics that went out for the marketing stuff was okay, but all the logo stuff I just thought was really weak and really sloppy, and like the first option, it didn't feel like Wonder Woman, an identity for a DC Wonder Woman movie. Massively disappointed. I wouldn't recommend you go and see it. I'm going to give this a 1 out of 10, a Wonder Woman 1 out of 10, because that sounds like a great alliteration. Anyway, watch it at your peril. This has dragged on for a little bit long, but yeah, I had a lot to say about it. So hopefully you enjoyed it, and avoid this shocking mess if you can. And I'll catch up with you on some more movies in the next intermission. So all's left to say is be good, stay safe, and be kind to one another. Cheers.